In identity-based motivation research, there is a really important idea. Our identities can feel completely stable, but they are also highly sensitive to the situations, the environments, and the cues all around us, meaning who you think you are is not just living inside your head. It is being reinforced by the rooms that you actually walk into, the relationships that you stay in, the behaviors that you repeat, the roles that you keep playing, the hats that you keep putting on, and the standards that you keep tolerating. And that matters because a lot of people think that identity change honestly sounds like, hey, I just need to become a new person. Let me just swap out that hat. But most of the time, in reality, identity change is much more subtle than that. It sounds like I'm going to practice being someone I can trust, or I am going to practice being honest. I'm going to practice being regulated. I'm going to practice no longer abandoning myself, because you do not become who you are by thinking about it once. You become someone you are practicing repeatedly.
Hey there, Evolver. If you have found this channel, you're probably someone who thinks deeply about life, growth, and the human mind. My name is Amelia, and this is a channel where we explore the psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience of what it actually means to evolve as a human being.
So in my work with individuals, couples, and leaders around the world, identity is one of the deepest layers that is underneath layers underneath change. And people often will come wanting to change behavior and say, Amelia, I need this change. They want to communicate maybe differently with their partners, set better boundaries, stop over functioning, get out of functional freeze, trust themselves, follow through, right? The list goes on and on. Stop even choosing that relationship pattern that they are in and again. And of course, I'm not going to say behavior doesn't matter, because it does. But behavior is rarely just behavior. Over time, behavior actually becomes the evidence, and the receipts that we have, that evidence, the receipts of those behaviors become the belief that we hold. The belief that we hold, or the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, becomes our identity. So if someone has spent complete years just completely abandoning themselves, right? It's not like they're going to simply think to themselves, I say yes when I meant to say no. Or things like that, right? They may begin to believe over time, I am someone whose needs do not matter. Now, if someone has spent years over functioning, they're not going to simply think, oh, today Amelia, I took on way too much today, right? They're going to begin to believe I'm only valuable when I am useful. And if someone has spent years, decades silencing themselves to keep connection, they're not going to simply think, I avoided conflict. They're going to begin to believe over time, being myself has costs. Love that I care about, deep love. And that is why identity work matters so much, because the real growth that we all want, it's not just changing what the heck we do. It is changing what our system believes and has receipts to. Because your choices, what they mean, the choices that we make mean so much about who we are. And this is one of the reasons that I care so much about the word evolver. You will hear that come through in so many of these EVE episodes, because to me, an evolver is not just someone who has everything figured out. It is someone who is practicing again and again, becoming more conscious, more honest, more regulated, more responsible, and way more aligned to their core values over time. It's not in being perfect that you're an evolver, and it's instead quite the opposite. Repeatedly showing up. And that distinction matters here, because so much of growth culture, if you will, makes people feel like they need to arrive somewhere before they are worthy. But in our ecosystem at Evolve, identity is the practice. You are not an evolver because you never struggle. Imagine a world where you never struggled, as if that exists. You are an evolver because you are willing to keep relating to the struggle differently with every corner you turn. So in the last video, we talked about environmental design, the idea that your environment is not neutral. It is literally and constantly trying to train something inside of you. So this episode takes that one layer deeper, because if your environment keeps training your behavior, eventually that behavior is going to start to feel like identity. And that's what happens for all of us. If urgency is always rewarded, you may start to feel like you're the only safe person, or you're only safe when you are moving fast. If overgiving is always praised, you may start to feel like you are only loved when you are available. And if silence keeps the peace, you may start to feel like honesty itself is dangerous. And this is all unconscious. So the question becomes, what identity is my life currently practicing? And on top of that, is that the identity I want to keep becoming? And here's the distinction that I want you to hold today. Identity as a label, it says, this is who I am. Identity as a practice asks, what am I rehearsing every single day? And labels can become too rigid within themselves. I'm anxious, I'm avoidant, I'm inconsistent, I am bad at boundaries, I'm the strong one, I'm the weak one, I'm the people that people can rely on, or I'm the person people can rely on. But practice itself gives you agency. I am practicing pausing before I answer. I am practicing telling the truth sooner. I am practicing asking for support. I'm practicing not rescuing every single freaking problem that comes up in my family. I'm practicing being someone who can keep small promises to myself. And that shift matters because a label can feel like a life sentence. But practice, it gives you a path. So let's say, for example, first one, someone has spent years saying yes when they have meant no. At first, it might look like a boundary issue, and it is on the surface. But over time, it can now sink into that identity layer where it's actually an identity issue. They start to believe I'm easy, I'm agreeable, I'm low maintenance, I'm the person who does not disappoint people. And when they actually start finally trying to set a boundary, the discomfort is not just about the sentence itself or the actual behavior in and of itself. It is about the identity threat that's there that they're not aware of. A part of them is actually thinking, if I say no, who the heck am I now? If I'm not easy, will I still be loved? If I'm not endlessly available to others, will people stay? And that is why boundaries can feel so destabilizing at first, because you're not just changing a behavior, you are literally practicing a new identity that is so unfamiliar to you. So the myelin sheath that you have going, the grooves that you have set down to the you that you know, these are new grooves. They're setting down new train tracks in your head, of course, right? So the first time that you practice a new identity, it may feel unnatural. And I would venture to say it will feel unnatural. That's the discomfort that you're looking for. But not because it's wrong, because it's just simply unfamiliar to your nervous system, to the brain pathways that you have. So let's talk about a second example where I see this come up all the time in leadership. A leader wants to become more strategic, right? They want maybe more ownership from their team. They want to stop being a bottleneck. Maybe they want to be proactive, right? But the part of their identity that is still attached to being the rescuer, the one who knows, the one who fixes, the one who swoops in and catches everything before it all breaks or fall down, right? What ends up happening, the delegation does not just simply feel like a task shift in their system. It actually feels like an entire identity loss. The automatic thoughts there are like, if I'm not the one holding it all together, am I still valuable? If I'm not needed at every single decision point, am I still leading? Is that leadership? Right? But the next level leadership identity is totally different. How we evolve at that next level, it's saying my value is not only in what I carry or what I rescue. My value is in what I build, clarify, systematize, and develop in others. That is a totally different identity, and it has to be practiced. So sometimes that old identity, it wasn't wrong. It was just simply too small for the next season that you're stepping into. And this is something that we see constantly inside Evolve's work, whether it is individual growth, couples work, group work, or leadership development, right? People are usually not just changing their habits, if you will, they're literally changing those layers, the identity architecture underneath the habit itself. And that is why we do not only ask, hey, what did you do? We are also asking the questions, what did that choice reinforce? Did it reinforce self-abandonment? Did it reinforce self-trust? Did it reinforce avoidance? Did it reinforce honesty? What about overfunctioning? Did it reinforce leadership? Because every single choice that we have is teaching the system something about who you are becoming. And that's where I see the third example, classic in this, is healing. Someone has done a lot of inner work. I have someone in mind right now. They've done a lot of inner work, right? They know their patterns. They understand their nervous system. They can name the trauma response. They can explain the protective part. Heck, they might have even had one step in the field of doing that for other people. But they still feel completely identified with being wounded. Not because they want to stay there, but because the wounded identity itself has become completely familiar to them, to where any step outside of that, it becomes unfamiliar and therefore scary, right? So it may have given language to their pain at one point or another, and it may have certainly helped them understand themselves at the deeper layers at that time. It may have literally even made the chaos finally make sense. And that is absolutely valid. But there comes a point in time where the work becomes, can I honor what happened to me without completely organizing my entire identity around it? Not denying the wound, not rushing past it, not pretending it didn't shape you, not pretending you're not impacted by it, but instead asking, who am I becoming with this history? Because healing does not mean your past just all of a sudden stops mattering. It means that your past is no longer the only author of your identity. We say this all the time. Just because you had trauma doesn't mean you're traumatized, right? You have a say in what that story writes. And from a nervous system perspective, old identities can feel safe because at the end of the day, they're just familiar. Even if they hurt, even if they limit you, even if they literally keep repeating that same pattern that you want to bash your head up against a wall to try to break. Because familiarity itself can feel like safety to the body, and it does. So when you become, this new person, it's a byproduct of practices. But when you begin practicing a new identity layer, your system may resist, reject, or fight like hell against you. Not because this new identity is wrong per se, but because it really, when we think about it, it's not become predictable to your nervous system yet. Familiar, if you will. And this is why change really feels awkward. And we oftentimes resist it before it actually feels authentic. Because your system is learning, hey, can I be this version of myself and still be safe? Can I say no and still belong? Can I be visible to the world and still survive criticism? Can I still rest and be valuable? Can I tell the truth and still stay connected to the people that I love and care about? Identity change requires evidence, not just insight. And this is where a lot of advice, if you go clicking around identity, it becomes way too simplistic and surface level. People say, just decide who you want to be. And there is power for sure in choice. I'm with you. But identity is not just a decision. It is a relationship internally between your choices, your nervous system, your environment, your history, and the evidence you keep creating. So while yes, choose who you want to become, but then build the evidence around it. Build the environment so that it helps you build that evidence around it. Build the relationships, build the practices, build the systems that make that identity livable, breathable, because identity does not become real all of a sudden when you declare it at once. It becomes real because your life begins to organize around it. And this entire episode is the identity layer. So here is a central question. What identity is being reinforced by the way I am living right now? Not what identity do I admire? What identity sounds good? What do I think my friends will think I'm cool about with? And what identity would make a good Instagram picture and should I post about? But what identity is my calendar if I were to do an audit reinforcing? What identity are my relationships reinforcing right now? What identity are my boundaries reinforcing? What identity are my standards reinforcing? What identity are my private choices behind the scenes when no one's watching reinforcing? Because the private practice becomes a public person. So the way that I see it, becoming is not actually aesthetic. It's not going to be your Instagram feed, and it's not certainly the life that you'll see on a Pinterest board. It's really not. The language, the brand, the identity statements, right? The future version of you, it's not that beautiful vision board. But those things matter because becoming is much quieter than that. It is the moment that you tell the truth when it would be easier to perform, the moment that you pause instead of reacting to someone that just lights you up, the moment that you actually keep one small promise to yourself when you failed to all the time in the past, the moment that you stop negotiating your own knowing and your own value, the moment that you choose a standard, even though no one else was watching. That is where identity and real identity is built, not in the announcement to the world, but in the repetition. I wish more people understood this. So let's break it down. 3 simple ways to work with identity. The first step is name the identity that is being practiced. Ask yourself, what version of me does this pattern keep reinforcing? The abandoned self, the overfunctioning self, the silent self, the reactive self, the hidden self, the self that leads, the honest self, the regulated self. There's so many different selves. Don't shame it. Just name it. Don't shame it. Just name it. Step number 2, let's name the identity that you want to practice, not as some fantasy, not as some picture hanging on the wall, as a direction. I am practicing being someone who tells the truth sooner. I am practicing being someone who rests before resentment. I am practicing being someone who leads through systems, not through rescue. I am practicing being someone who I care about. I am practicing being someone who keeps small promises. The phrase I am practicing is critical. It removes the pressure that those inner critics want to come in with to perform perfection. I am practicing is going to be your best friend. Step number 3 is choosing the identity confirming action. One action that gives your system actual evidence it can link to. Send the honest message. Take the pause when you need it. Let someone else own a task. Go to bed when you said you would. Ask for support. Hold that freaking boundary. Do a small thing privately that your parts notice. And then I want you to notice, what did this choice teach my system about who I am becoming? That is the evidence loop. So if you are in a season of becoming, unfolding, doing your dang thing as an evolver, do not only ask, who do I want to be? I want you to ask, what am I practicing? What is my environment reinforcing? What are my relationships expecting of me? What do my private choices prove? What evidence am I giving my system here and now? Because ultimately, identity is not just discovered. It is practiced. And you become what you practice. Not once, not perfectly, but repeatedly. So practice that version of you that you want to become, because that becoming is what I want your nervous system to begin to build trust to. Practice the honest self, the regulated self, the self-led self, the evolver, and let the evidence build, my friends. I'll see you on the other side of some evidence. You got this.
And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you want to actually go a little bit further in the specific practical application in your world, join me and other evolvers at EVE Reflections, where we will dig into this together as a community, where you're not alone and where you are working on this with other evolvers. Click the link in the show notes. You'll get access to that. And I'm excited to continue this work together as we evolve together. Take care, everyone. Until next time, keep evolving.